Welcome to the Mental Advantage Podcast. Whether you're an athlete trying to perform at your best when it counts the most, a coach or business leader trying to get more out of your team, or someone looking for more personal growth, this is the place for you. This podcast is your map to guide you to the right mindset, systems, and strategies you need to become the best version of yourself. And now, here's John Cullen and Brandon Allen.
All right, welcome into the show this week. So for those of you who tune in weekly to hear the guests, this is not going to be the show you're looking for because it's just going to be Brandon and I. I always feel like we have to preface that, Brandon, to just let people know what they're in for as they continue to be like, okay, let's get to the introduction, John.
Or not in for, right?
Yeah, or not in for. People, I always wonder about how many people are like, all right, that'll be it for this week. I wonder what happened on Joe Rogan's Experience this week.
I'm pretty sure. They're either
we don't share listeners.
I don't know that there's a whole lot of crossover. I would imagine there's probably a whole lot of, hey, Alexa, fast forward 5 minutes just to see if it gets better.
Oh, nope, it's still them.
No, it's just them still.
Yeah. But man, I tell you, we've got some exciting guests coming up that need finalized, but we won't get into any of the names. That's even worse of a teaser, is telling you a teaser without the names. But I think you'll find that they're pretty consistent with some of the great guests we've had on so far. For sure. But man, it's interesting, Brandon, you and I don't get a chance to always just kind of talk about what we're observing lately in the world of mental performance and, sports psychology, some of the things that we're always unpacking with our guests. But there's so much stuff that's been on my mind lately as it relates to, really what I would consider fake mental performance. And it's where you have individuals, and we've seen these as coaches, we've played with players like this that are the guys that you would think on the outside that they are really mentally tough and that they are ready, like, I live for last minute shots, or I live for those last inning, type of action. And then when it really gets in there and the pressure gets there, you realize, hey, they weren't really in for it, right?
Well, for sure. And I think, I think a lot of times athletes feel like that's what they have to say, right? They feel like, I have to give off that persona that I want the ball in my hands, that nothing bothers me. When in fact, they're just like everybody else. And there are times where, they don't want it, that they're scared. And I think, one of the things that we've heard kind of repeatedly throughout the episodes is you're not going to show up every day with your A game, right? But can you still be committed, right? Not confident, but can you still be committed to your process and committed to the fact that, hey, I've done this repeatedly. I should be able to perform here, even though it's not my A game.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing I think is you talk about that, can I be committed to it, is working through some of those difficulties by putting them in pressure situations in practice, gives you the opportunity as a coach. Because look, it's one thing to have a player on your team or a worker in your business team that doesn't necessarily have that mental toughness that you think they have. But the worst thing is when you find out about it during a game. So if you can put them in situation, game or a meeting, right? A big sales presentation. So if you can put them in those situations, those uncomfortable moments, as Rob Bell talked about, Dr. Rob Bell talked about on our last show, and we've had other guests talk about this, but if you can put them in that intentional discomfort, as Andy Reese would say, now all of a sudden you're going to have a better chance of actually seeing that pop up and you can shine a light on that sooner and then give them permission and have that discussion with them, because we're not saying that's a bad thing necessarily. It's a bad thing if it goes unnoticed. It's one of those things that you're going to want to find out pretty quickly. This person's not who they say they are. It's a little bit of a facade. And now, as a leader, as a coach, as a mentor, whatever the case would be, I can now work with them, but give them permission to be like, look, it's all right. I observed something in practice today that looked like you were getting a little bit frustrated during that moment of, high pressure situation we put you all in that intra-squad game. Let's talk about that. What was going through your mind? It gives you that coaching moment, and not to shy away from it.
For sure. And I think, going back to that kind of false bravado, I think, so many people are brought up with the thought that you either have it or you don't. And the one thing that we've identified and learned from, with the podcast is that it is a practice. And so, to your point, whether it's something like when Dr. Mo's talking about how he'll have somebody sprint, right, and then come back and try to make a putt, you can't ever emulate and practice what it would feel like to stand over a 7-footer to win the Masters. You won't be able to do that, but to at least try. And so if you can't do that, by the way, how in the world do you expect to be capable of standing over that putt and knowing what it feels like? So failure is a real option right there. Yeah. And it doesn't make you anything other than human, and it doesn't need to be anything more than, to your point, a coachable or learning experience, so that the next time that happens, right, and it's one of those interesting things when you talk about golf, it really, any sport, how many times do you hear, he might be the best person to ever not have done this, right? Where they talk about Barkley as a basketball player, right? He may be one of the best guys that never won a championship.
As well in football.
Phil Mickelson, Dan Marino. Yeah. I mean, you can Mike Trout, right? I mean, there's all of this stuff that kind of goes with that, but with every one of those is an opportunity to learn, and eventually those guys usually break through, right? I mean, especially if it's an individual sport. I mean, at some point when you don't have to rely on everybody else, they typically will have learned enough lessons that they break through.
And I think, as a parent, I think about parenting when I think of this as well, is just the importance of giving permission. And I said it a minute ago, but I really want parents to think about this, business leaders to think about this, is to your point about failure, is understanding. I think if you set that expectation early on that, guys, I believe there's winning and there's learning, right? There's not the losing. It's not necessarily failure. It's not necessarily, yes, you've attempted something and you did not succeed at it, but let's take that as an opportunity to learn. And I think with your kids as a parent, with your players as coaches, with your employees as business leaders, if you can set the expectation early on that you can appreciate that moment of not succeeding, so that and as a learning moment, people are going to be more comfortable taking that risk that you're talking about. They're going to be more comfortable, kind of stepping outside of that comfort zone, and maybe shooting some of those shots, last second shots, or, being up there in that last inning situation, late inning situation where they have to be in a situation of winning or losing. But, Brandon, not to pick on Devin Booker of the Phoenix Suns, because I know he's probably a big listener of the show. That's probably part of his pregame routine, right? But I don't know if you saw the video the other night of,
oh my gosh,
I think it was from a couple of days ago. Yeah. He's like shooting a foul shot for the listeners. He's shooting a foul shot in an empty arena, basically with no fans. The only person or thing, I guess, since it's the Toronto Raptors mascot, is like behind the basket, like waving their arms or whatever. And Devin Booker loses it. Like he's so frustrated.
Well, and the funny part is, and look, I think from an athlete standpoint, for sure, the smaller the crowd, the worse.
Yes,
it
you hear
is,
everything
because you literally hear everything, right? But this is a cartoonish blow up. I mean, it's somebody inside a giant like inflatable, right? And all it's doing is waving its hands, and he asks security to have him removed. Yeah, not the most probably resilient moment for sure.
I thought I laughed. I saw a guy on Twitter had said something like, "Hey, it's hard to claim you have Mamba mentality whenever you're letting the only fan in the arena get to you." But it reminded me of a great years ago. I was at a baseball conference and I heard Turtle Thomas, who I believe is still the head coach at FIU, Florida International, who we played in college, but Turtle wasn't there at the time. Told a great story about the Rock, the Marshmallow, and the Jellybean when he was talking about players to look out for. And he said, he kind of categorizes, there's three types of players from a mental toughness, resilient standpoint. He said, you've got the Rock is that stability, you know what you're getting. It's hard. It's willing to take on all challenges. It's the one that wants the bat in the late innings. It's the person who wants to take that last second shot. They're dependable. He said the Marshmallow, is not the person you're wanting to depend on in those situations. They're a little bit softer, not as resilient, don't necessarily want the ball in the big moments. But you know what you're getting. It's a Marshmallow. But he said the player you worry about and the one that concerns you as a coach is the Jellybean. It's the hard on the outside, soft on the inside, right? It's they put that, to your point earlier, that persona out there that, hey, I'll take the last second shot, give it to me, or I can handle that pressure moment, but they're inside a little bit softer. And it is one of those things that, whether it was the Devin Booker thing or, like I said earlier, just that idea of those that try to fake it. And I think we've talked so much about it, just been really hot on my or high on my radar lately.
Yeah, for sure. And it is the, as a coach, you probably can't identify the Jellybean until they've been given an opportunity or two. Right. And look, in Devin Booker's defense, right, you don't know what that guy's going through that day.
Right. Absolutely.
Who knows what that guy in the inflatable is yelling that you can't hear. But those are the situations, and I know you talk about it all the time, right? Is the E plus R equals O, right? And how are you going to respond to that event? And I mean, you and I have dealt with it. I mean, I can think of times where, you have to decide, am I going to let that outside influence in? Whether it's, it could be the fans, it could be weather. It could, you know what I mean? Like if you're outside playing in a game and it's hot, or it's going to start to rain, or it's snowing, or whatever, it's how really are you going to respond to that?
Yeah.
And are you even going to let it in? And I think that, I've got all kinds of stories of where you for sure heard it and you for sure had to let it go in one ear and out the other. And then there are times that you do react, and it's interesting because you don't, as a player, you don't always know exactly that day that you might let them in. And sometimes they're just funny. and you can't help but
laugh. Or at least smile.
If they see it, it's over. Because if they see you even kind of chuckle a little bit, they know that you can at least hear them. Yeah.
You bring up a great point there, because about Devin Booker, we don't know what he was going through. And to follow up what you're just saying, I think it's so important to understand and not let this pass, is the point you made earlier about you're not always going to have your A game. And like you've said before on the show, and we've had other guests say this, is chances are you don't have your A game. You're going to probably have to find a way to compete with that B and C game. But it is interesting that when I would bet you, without even looking at the score, without even looking at his line and the box score that night, Devin's probably competing that night with a C game or something, because typically when it's not working out for you is when you are, to your point, going to almost start having some of those distractions come in, versus when you're dialed in. It's the reason they call it the zone, right? When you're in that A game, I mean, the reason I tell people all the time, the lack of frequency that you actually show up and play with your A game is indicative of the fact that we actually have a term for it called the zone, right? So that means it's something unique at some time, or he was just in the zone that day or whatever. But when you're in that zone and you're, playing with your A game, I'll guarantee you Devin Booker doesn't even know that Raptor, fuzzy mascot exists that night. Yeah. So I think it's a really good point you bring up about B and C games, or him not whatever was going on in his situation, his life that day, which I think is also another point we should underscore for you business leaders out there before we move on, is seek first to understand. It's the old, Stephen Covey mindset. So when you do have those players, if you are putting them in deliberate discomfort, or you are working through something at work and you see somebody struggling and they're not maybe being as resilient or demonstrating as much mental toughness as you would like, is don't assume right away that you have a marshmallow, or even like we just talked about, a jelly bean, but ask some questions. Hey, what's going on? How's everything? Is everything okay? Because you may pull out something that's a little bit deeper, like you were just talking about. So good stuff. Another thing, Brandon, that's been on my mind recently is this idea. I'm getting ready to do a talk to a college baseball team, and I was starting to talk about teamwork and kind of get my head around this idea of like, okay, what are some things I want to talk to them about? And I had the opportunity to hear from Pat Murphy, who's the University of Alabama softball coach. I had an opportunity to listen in on a Zoom call that he was the guest speaker on recently, and he was talking about culture and he was talking about character, and there was a couple of different things. And one of the things he talked about I really liked was he was sharing this story about when he has players come in, he asks them this question: is, what do you think an intangible is? And he gets their definition of an intangible. And then he tells them what he believes an intangible to be. And then based on that definition, he'll say to them again, now do you understand, are we on the same page as far as an intangible? And they'll, you say yes or no, and they'll kind of talk through that. Then he asks them, which I think is a really great question, is what's the intangible you're going to bring to our team this year? And he shared a story about, one year, one of the players, it actually happened to be the year they won the national championship for softball. I want to say it's 2016 or something like that. I probably got that wrong. But he said that one of his players said, my intangible this year is that in the infield, because she was an infielder, when everything hits the fan, when it's just the wheels are falling off, and Lord knows if you've played baseball or softball or any sport, there are moments where the wheels are just falling off and nothing can go right. I'm going to be a calming force for our infielders. I'm going to be that person that they can, that's going to level set everything, which was a really, really great intangible. But it just got me thinking about this idea of like, what's my intangible, right? Like, what's my intangible to this podcast? What's your intangible? What's my, at work? What's my intangible for my family situation? What am I going to bring to the family? So really challenging myself with that.
So I need you to stop worrying about what my intangible is.
It's in work in progress.
I don't need that kind of pressure in my life. I'll ask the security team to remove you from your microphone.
That's right.
But I think what's really interesting to me is I think we all have them. And I think very few people take the time to reflect on that, because we all have strengths. We all bring something unique to a team environment. I think too, and for some of our listeners, they may have kind of gone through this, whether it was themselves or a child or something. Coaches, especially when you start moving up the ladder, intangibles become so important to them, because those are the things that they can't typically coach.
Yeah. Right.
Those are things that particular individual has developed and really has become a fabric of who they are. Right. I mean, we all know them. You the optimist, and then you got the cheerleader, and then you've got the kind of the gritty a-hole that can kind of push people, but it doesn't rub people the wrong way. Right. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because they lead by example. So there's all these intangible leadership skills that coaches are looking for, because quite frankly, talent is a dime a dozen. I mean, There's always somebody better, or at worst, similar, right? And that's why you hear all the time coaches talk about, I'd rather have an individual who's willing to work or has those intangibles. I'll take them over somebody that has skill but no work ethic, right? Mm-hmm. And look, and make no mistake about it, you start talking about certain things that they can't coach, the genetic piece where you can't coach 7 feet, right? You've heard people talk about that. I can't make you 7 feet tall if you're not 7 feet tall. I can't make you a certain way if you're not already kind of traveling down that path or have a predisposition to it. So I love that. I love that as a coach to ask the team, hey, what is it that you're going to bring that I can't coach and that you can help instill into the fabric of this team?
Yeah. It's the it factor. And, it's funny. I want people to understand, everybody thinks of the it factor. You think of Tiger, you think of, Phil, you think of Tom Brady, Jordan, like, oh, they have this, it's, there's immediate success that comes with this, having that it factor. Everybody has an it factor. If you want to have the it factor, if you have that thing that you can bring to your, it's the little extra, like you just said. And what I love about it is, that you talk about commitment a minute ago and being greater than confidence. There's going to be times as a player that you're not going to be able to bring all of the other things to the table, but you can always, if your intangible that year is energy, you can commit to always bringing energy to the team or practice or whatever the case would be. So, it's something I would definitely challenge people to do, is find out what it is in every walk of life. What's my intangible going to be? It kind of goes back a little bit to what's your one word brand going to be? What's the thing you want people to remember you for? And then do a 30-day assessment. Every 30 days, just challenge, you give a challenge to yourself as we start this new year. What's my intangible going to be at work? And then every 30 days, just ask yourself, hey, am I still doing that? And let other people know, get commitment partners, right? Like, hey, Brandon, I know, we're on the same work team. This is going to be my intangible. This is what I'm going to try to bring to every one of our meetings. Hold me accountable to this, find that accountability partner.
For sure. And the important piece to that is, that intangible is something that's controllable, right? Yeah. So, because going back to that earlier concept of I may not have my A game today, that's fine, but you can still give all the effort You can still have, a good body language. You can still grind and be mentally tough. I mean, you can still do all of those things. And that takes no skill from a physical perspective or even a mental perspective, right? Hey, this is what I'm going to do today. Just like every day, I'm going to show up and I'm going to give you everything that I have today, whatever that actually looks like.
Yeah. So speaking of controllable, and then I'm really excited about the last part of today's show, and I should have probably even talked about this at the beginning of the show, but Brandon and I, this is such a serious topic in a way that we talk about weekly is, mental performance, and we talk about mental health, and there's all kinds of aspects to that. But one of the things that many of the listeners may not know that's always fascinated you and I is around reviews, and people leave reviews all the time for restaurants. They leave them for businesses. They leave them for you name it. It seems like anymore, everyone wants to share their opinion, especially online. But Brandon and I had a conversation a few months ago where I think I was sharing just a review, that I had read, and we started laughing about it. And we had this idea that why don't we make that like a side podcast? Like it could be something we do maybe once. It's not going to be weekly, but just once every month or something where we do this show. So we're going to give you all a little window into that in the last probably 20 minutes of this show. We're going to play a little snippet, if you will, from a show that Brandon and I are working on, a new podcast called Under Further Review. That is where we're just going to read some of the reviews and we'll comment on it because, like I said, you talk about mindset. It takes a special kind of mindset to leave a full page review for your local McDonald's.
It does, but it's definitely an interesting look in to the mind of some of the cultural and societal, what people think is okay now, right? It's pretty interesting for sure.
We're definitely in a catch you doing it wrong moment in time. And I think that is what, but as you all will hear, probably I would say maybe a little bit more of our personality, I guess, in the sense that, most of the time our conversations are just us, laughing it up on the phone about those types of things. So for those of you who are tuning in for a little bit lighter side of Brandon and I think this show will be right up your alley. But I definitely want to make sure that we play them a snippet of that. So that will be at the end of this particular episode. And then last thing I'll just say, just wrapping up the mental performance piece for our regular weekly Mental Advantage podcast, is willing and capable are two things that I've been really, as I was preparing this talk for this team coming up next week, is that, we talk about goals a lot on this show, and we've used this question before of, when you're figuring out your goals, and it's probably a good time for us to be talking about this, is when you're figuring out your New Year's resolution or whatever, is you have to ask yourself at some point, what am I willing to do? What am I willing to sacrifice? But what am I willing to do? And I really think people need to take some time to sit with that question a little bit, because you have to have some honest dialogue with yourself. And you notice I didn't say, what are you capable of doing? Because we know from talking to all of our great guests over this last year that we're capable of so much more than what we even believe we're capable of. So it's not a matter, I don't think the question is ever, am I capable of losing 50 pounds by the end of the year? Just a little window into my New Year's resolution there. But am I willing to do it, right? Am I willing to do all the things I'm going to have to sacrifice to do that?
For sure. And I'm assuming that weight loss is the lighter side you referenced earlier. But I think that, and kind of like we were talking about with the intangible stuff too, John, is, you hit it on the head. It requires people to be honest with themselves and to be patient. I think we just, as from a societal standpoint, we get so wrapped up in this instant gratification. The things that you're talking about, whether it's a New Year's resolution, whether it's determining what your strengths are, that doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen in a 5-minute meditative session. This takes time, and sometimes you have to admit that, you know what, I'm not good at that. Like that's not a strength of mine. So that probably isn't my intangible. I mean, there are people that just maybe not have a positive outlook, and that's okay. That's part of who they are. But those things where you're like, hey, what am I willing to do? That to me is always forefront of what you're capable of. So just to your point, hey, I'm capable of walking out the door right now and not returning until tomorrow. I can walk for, the next 18 hours. I'm capable of that. Am I willing to do that? No. Why would I? Like, why would I even go do that right now? Because that's not something that I'm willing to do at this point in time. Because they're in understanding that this isn't a cop out, but life happens. So you may have a willingness to do something as well. You just may not be willing to do it at that particular time because of the chapter of life that you're in. And the more that you understand, it doesn't have to happen overnight, but it has to happen. And allow some grace for yourself and patience for yourself. I mean, I think it's you can get there.
Yeah. And I think it's a great way to wrap that up. I mean, and be very specific for yourself too, is, I'm willing to do this. And like I say, just really spend some time with that. So, well, guys, listen, that's all we've got today. Hopefully you guys will, stick around and listen and give us your feedback on the little snippet of Under Further Review that we will play you after this show. And send us an email. Really what I would love to see happen is it get to a point where you guys are starting to send us some emails with reviews that you found to be particularly amusing. So make sure you're filling up the inbox. You can reach us on Facebook. We've got the Mental Advantage Podcast Facebook group. We've got the Mental Advantage Podcast Instagram page. And we also have the, podcast at mentaladvantage.com, which we can use for now and probably will use in the future just because we're not the best at keeping up with all of this. So having another email address for Under Further Review would probably not be something we are willing to do. We're capable of doing it, but not something we're willing to do.
Not at this chapter of our life. Correct.
Yeah. So we will talk to you next week. All right, so welcome into our first episode, I guess, or first preview for Under Further Review. This is John Cullen with Brandon.allen. Some of you listeners may know us from the Mental Advantage Podcast, which is another podcast Brandon and I've been doing for almost a year now. But, one of our I wouldn't say it's a passion. It's probably a guilty pleasure more than anything, is that Brandon and I have always got a kick out of reading what people write down as far as their opinions when it comes to restaurants or movies or, businesses, whatever. We've just always thought it was really interesting that somebody's going to take the time to write as much as they typically write, and really wonder sometimes what the actual business thinks about it. So ideally, I think our future kind of vision for this show is not only to hear from you all and get your input on some of the reviews you've read on Yelp or wherever that you think are really funny, but also I would love, Brandon, one of these times to have one of the owners of the business come in and give their side of the story, right? Because some of these they've got to remember.
You have, yeah. I mean, some of them, I don't know if you were the owner of that establishment and that was the review, you should probably have a
it should be on your radar
of what happened that night. Yeah, for sure.
Well, let's get into a few of these, and then we'll start to unpack a little bit more as we get to show number 2 and show number 3, some other direction of where we're going. But just to give you all an idea, we thought we would put out a preview show that's maybe 15, 20 minutes long, just so you could kind of get a feel for what we're talking about, so that when you are sending in examples, you'll know what we're looking for. So this was one, Brandon, and I think it's also because you and I travel a lot. We're always looking at Yelp or TripAdvisor or something like that to find out, hey, is this a restaurant that's pretty good? And recently I was traveling in Tennessee, and there was a local restaurant that I was, that happened to be in the area that I was staying. And this struck me, was a 2-star review that somebody had left. And the person says, did not have the best experience here. It was probably an, quote, off day for them. The fire alarm was going off. A guy pulled out a sword and got belligerent that they would not store it on their wall. So I can see how the cooks may have been distracted. That being said, great ambiance. The food was very lacking. Wife and I did not make it past the first bite. Manager was accommodating. May return to give them another chance.
Well, I mean, first of all, that's extremely gracious. I don't know. I'm guessing that I don't know what could possibly have happened to only give it 1 star. If you gave them 2 after that, I mean, right, that is
right. That was, guy got really fired up about the sword. The food after 1 bite, that's what got me, was after 1 bite, they're like, I can't even take, I don't know if I've had a meal in a restaurant where you take 1 bite and you're like, that's it. I absolutely can't,
Yeah, I'm not familiar with ever being that picky. Maybe they should have given another bite the benefit of the doubt, the way that they're going to give the restaurant. I wonder though, from the distraction standpoint of the cooks, how distracted were they by the sword? I mean, right. Who's wielding a sword, and how does that even? How does that even happen?
It's like the Great Kabuki is.
I mean, what? I mean, do you look at the person you're with and going, "Hey, is this part of a play?
Like, is this just walked in?
Yeah, is this like a dinner theater, or what's going on here?"
I love the fact that in the middle of this review, where he's just basically ripping this place, he throws in a. That being said, great ambiance. Now, was the ambiance a sword wielding man part of the ambiance?
Or maybe it was that there were so many swords already on the wall that created a great ambiance. There just wasn't room for another. So right. I don't know.
Buried the lead. The place is called the Sword Shop. It actually it's not even a restaurant. We find out. But then the guy says, I ate the meal. I take 1 bite, never going to eat it again. But you know what? I think we'll give it another chance.
But you know what? The management was so accommodating. Maybe they're going to fire the cook. I don't know. I don't know how but seriously, tip of the cap to the manager whoever handled that as well as they did, to have that experience. Number 1, that you got 2 stars out of it. Number 2, that you actually have them willing to give you another shot. That's the kind of manager I need. I need it in my job.
Yeah, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, what was I have so many follow-up questions. It's one thing I wish that Yelp and TripAdvisor did, is where you could just have a question. Like, I know you can reply, but it'd be so great to be like, hey, raise your hand. Can I ask a couple follow-up questions on this one? Because I would love to know, to your point, what were the accommodations that the guy, did he maybe let these guys put their sword up? Like that could have been.
Maybe they did say, hey, come back with your own sword. We'll put it up. And
we just didn't like that guy's sword.
Right. The next, round of kebabs are on us. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. I swear. So so this particular restaurant in Tennessee.
So did you go to it?
Big sword. I did order out from there. I think. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I didn't, because I had a sword. I always carry, of course, me and my swords. I like to have,
traveling, you got to protect yourself.
You got to protect yourself. I can't emphasize that enough. So, that's always good. The other thing is, we talk about reviews that has always, and I think I kind of get restaurant reviews, to be honest with you. It's a sit down place. If you're you had a great experience or bad experience or whatever. Okay. But the ones that really, I think, amuse me the most is McDonald's reviews or any fast food restaurant, because I don't know about you, Brandon, but I've kind of always just taken the approach, it's buyer beware. It's a fast food restaurant. It's not like you're dealing with the A team. You've got, it is what it is. Right. So the people who take the time to not just write a couple sentences, the fries were cold, milkshake machine was broken or whatever, but to really take that time and put some effort into, because in their mind, we talk about mindset, of course, on our other podcasts all the time, but in these people's minds, in Mary J's mind, because that's who wrote this, Mary J. period. I don't think it's Mary J. Blige. I think she would have probably added the last name if that was the case. But in her mind, she's sitting down at the computer now, typing this in or on her phone, and she's like, somebody needs to let them know. Like this needs to be known not only by their management, but by everybody else. So here was her experience. So wish I could give this McDonald's a 0-star, strong opener. So she only gave him 1 star, spoiler alert. So wish I could given them a 0-star. Every single time I come through this drive-through, the order is messed up. The same young lady at the drive-through window named Lena accuses you of lying about the mess up. Then you show her the receipt and you prove her wrong, and she never apologizes and she gives you attitude. Tonight, my order again was incorrect. She accused me of lying and wanting to check the bag, only to find out they are training multiple new people and they made an error entering our order. I asked to speak to the manager. Her name was Allie. And I told her about this young lady accusing me of lying, giving me attitude, giving me nasty looks, Luxe, by the way, nasty looks. Her response was, yes, I know. I get multiple complaints about her daily, but there's nothing I can do about it. I tell my upper management, and they don't do anything about it. How is this even possible? This is terrible customer service. Never again am I going to this location. Well, except for the fact that you've now been to this location multiple times. Yeah.
Repeatedly, because every time they get it wrong and every time they accuse you of lying. Look, so I don't even know where you would even begin with that. Maybe it doesn't sound like Lena's super thrilled about being at McDonald's.
No, and she's not afraid to let them know that, she's not having it, but it's
I think Mary J might need to take her business elsewhere. I think that's one of those that you vote with your wallet.
Yeah. She's got to be related to James L., who's giving the restaurant a second chance after the knife wielder.
For sure. Or at least they have a very, very similar close personality that the first, and I'm with that. Hey, the first time, maybe
shame on me.
Maybe something was up. That's on me. Let's give them a shot. But at some point, I do think you have to go, you know what? I don't think I like Lena's attitude. Yes. I just want a quarter pounder. I don't need to be accused of lying.
I don't have to show the bag. She said I have to show.
I mean, really,
the bag
for what? Like that? You think that I'm really trying to con McDonald's out of a 10-piece McNugget? Hey, you didn't give me honey mustard, Mary J. Right? It's you again. Before. Oh, it's you again. I know you. Yeah, I remember you lying about your McNuggets. Yeah, come on.
Oh my gosh. So one more, and then we'll kind of wrap this up for everybody. But you gives you some idea of what to.
Hey, John, let me ask you a question though, for real. Sir. Like, so the thing that always interests me is why do people think that they are important enough that their opinion matters? And I look, for sure, we've all had bad experiences at anywhere, whether it's a sit down place or it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, from the quickest, fastest, lowest level of fast food to some really nice restaurants. You're gonna run into that stuff. But I guess I've just never thought that my opinion mattered enough that someone would want to hear about it. It is one of the things that I love. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's one perspective. That's the thing. It's always got me I don't really I'm not an opinion person because of the fact that what I may have considered to be, a bad, experience at the restaurant or whatever, maybe that was, somebody else would be like, you know what, I kind of expect this. It's all where you are. I think probably geographically, as well.
Maybe Mary J stole Lena's boyfriend. Who knows?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And she's
like, you're a liar. You are a liar. You lie about one thing. I know you.
Yes.
You lied about him.
Went to school with Mary J. I know what she's all about. I've known a million Mary J's in my life.
She's cutting the line in the cafeteria line all the damn time, talking about she didn't get her milk, even in the second grade. So
that's right.
You're a liar,
Lena has
Mary
not
J.
forgotten about all of that. When Lena was that school patrol that got milk duty, and Mary J tried that stuff with the milk money. She's been the same way. But I also think, Brandon, to your point, it's I think we've created this with the internet and the ability to do this stuff from a distance, because I don't think people were spending as much time. Like, I'm not so sure Mary J's pulling out the notepad and pen and writing this down and dropping it in the envelope back in the day. Or even she might have called, Mary J probably would have called up and let them give them a piece of their mind. But there is some of that anonymity, right, of the fact that we don't know if it's who Mary J is, other than if that's even her real name, or it's just her Yelp name. Or the fact of the matter is, though, everybody's got the keyboard power, right? They can say whatever they want. They can, leave whatever review they want. And it's almost like there's sometimes I think it's on Yelp or one of these where it'll say like how many reviews. Like, people take this really seriously. Like, they feel it's their duty to inform everybody they're a made up restaurant critic, almost like a self-proclaimed restaurant critic.
For sure.
That's crazy. So it's interesting, but we'll have to get into that. Maybe we that's one of the things we could do on the show is get in touch with some of these people somehow and say, hey, we'd be curious to find out what's going through your mind.
Did you and Lena patch things up? I mean,
well, I can tell you this much. I don't know if there's going to be any patching up with this one. This is from Lisa, and Lisa had another bad experience with a fast food chain. McDonald's, and I'll say it because I won't tell you where it is, just in case, I don't want them coming after us. But this is one that got my attention because there's a lot of really major claims being made in this. The first one right off the bat, where she says, 1 star, worst service ever and rude staff. Went through the drive-thru, and as usual, the order was wrong. This tends to be the trend at this particular McDonald's. Actually, it must be because, that's what Mary J was complaining about. It's the consistency of the poor performance.
Is this the same spot?
Same McDonald's.
Wow.
There was 2 back-to-back 1 stars that caught my attention. Went inside to have it fixed, and a short, skinny, old crotchety woman, I don't know if that's Lena or not, asked me, "What do you want?" "No, hi, how can I help you?" Just a rude bitch. I told her the problem, and she turned around, walked off, and came back with a bag and said, "Here, see you, bye." Turned around and walked off. Bad. So that none of that was the bad thing, because she's going to tell you what the bad thing is. Bad thing is she was the manager, which may explain why the rest of the staff is so miserable looking. And there was 2 other people behind me with wrong orders from the drive-thru as well. Terrible place. I do think, not projecting anything on this McDonald's, but we do have some consistency that there may be a drive-thru issue there.
But there may need to be some additional training for sure.
Might need to visit Hamburger U again.
Something probably needs to happen there.
Yeah.
And
I like the here. That's one of my favorite things about reviews is when they get into the dialogue. And I think what has always cracked me up or cracked us up, because this is something that we've laughed about in the past, is when they give you like the specifics, because I'm always laugh at the way that managers respond. Sometimes what makes the review so funny is just you're so blown away by the fact that somebody actually said this to a customer, and so that's great. And the other thing I like about it is when on Yelp or on TripAdvisor, where the management actually responds and gives you kind of like the other side of the story. Oh my God, that is so funny. So yeah, so a little bit there of what to expect from the show. We'll hope, of course, to get you all to start sending in, because we'd love to get these from all over the country, or maybe Ireland, since we have such a following with the Mental Advantage podcast in Ireland, that we'll get some of those in. But if you have some good ones that you know of, send them to us. We'll try to keep the restaurant's name out of it, just so that we don't get anybody in trouble. We'll be generic, at least, about it, just restaurant in this, Fayetteville, North Carolina, or whatever the case may be. But like I said, I think we can do some things with this, especially as we start to hopefully get in touch with some of the people involved in the actual review. Would be hilarious to get them on and interview them. For sure. That sounds fun. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, hope you enjoyed your first little snippet into Under Further Review. We'll talk to you guys soon.